Hello everyone, today I'll be explaining somatic cell division, or mitosis. Watch my channel and there's a possibility I might be uploading a video on meiosis sometime soon. So what is mitosis and why does it happen? Your body is composed of millions of microscopic units called cells. These cells perform functions like hold your DNA, which is crucial in making you, and cells also need to perform the function of taking in raw materials and outputting proteins for the many things cells need protein for, like building a cell wall, and which protects the cell and moderates what enters and leaves the cell through selective permeability. The cell wall is constructed of hundreds of small tubes that are intertwined in the same way you may construct a piece of cloth with the pattern over, under, you get the idea. Even though making the cell larger can be useful, it has some problems that may get in the way of its normal functions. Food and other foreign items are left in the cytoplasm, this empty space right here. And what happens is it just gets left there, and later, when the correct organism, like mitochondria or lysosomes or whatever, comes around, and the organism recognizes what it is and realizes it needs to take care of it, it'll take care of it and move on its course around the cell, or else it'll just skip and let the correct microorganism deal with it. And most of the time, foreign objects need to get to the nucleus, and from the nucleus to the cell membrane. Objects like DNA, protein, and virus proteins have to wait at the cell wall until the cell wall can spare a portion of its wall to enclose the item and escort it to where it needs to go. Now, if the cell gets too big, it may take longer to transport items throughout the cell. Like, for example, if the grocery store moved 50 miles more away from you, it may take longer to actually go and get the food and come back. And what happens is, if the cell gets too big, some entire processes may have to get halted because there's no raw materials coming in. Like the same way, if there was a factory that turned plastic into some kind of gadget, and the plastic stopped coming, everything would have to stop and no actual gadgets would be produced until the plastic started coming again. Same way, if like food stopped coming to the cell, everything would stop. However, it may be more fatal to the cell because the cell could actually die if it doesn't receive the food and nutrients that it needs to continue growing. So, after that, what happens is the cell, if it gets too big, it just simply cuts itself in half. And to start this cycle, it begins in this phase called interphase. Interphase can be divided into three parts: G1 phase, S phase, and G2 phase. In G1, what happens is the cell just functions like normal. This is where it spends most of its time. It basically stores nutrients and food and gets ready for the repairs and construction that may be needed to divide. After G1 phase, one of two things can happen. It can either enter G0 phase or S2 phase. If it's a cell that is not supposed to divide, like the cells in the hairs in your ear that help you hear, or heart cells, it will simply just enter G0 phase, where it just lives the remainder of its life until it hits apoptosis, which is basically a programmed cell death, where it explodes, and yeah. Where, on the other hand, if it is supposed to divide, it enters S phase. In S phase, the DNA is duplicated, which then can be used so that each cell can have the same set of instructions on how to live its life. After that, it can exit, well actually no, first, it goes to G2 phase. In G2 phase, basically the same thing as G1 phase, it just stores nutrients, prepares, like, the Golgi apparatus works as hard as ever, producing proteins, so that it has stuff to build a cell wall for later. After that, the cell exits interphase and enters prophase. In prophase, what happens is the centromeres, as demonstrated in this animation, what happens is this thing right here, the nuclear envelope, begins to dissolve, and the DNA gets compressed into these things called chromatides, these little X-shaped things. And also these T-shaped structures begin to move to opposite sides of the cell. These T-shaped structures have the DNA compressed. There are two strands, this strand and this strand. There's actually two here, even though the average human only has about 46 cells. Well, you have 46 cells if you... No. You have 46 chromatids, sorry. You have 46 chromatids if you're alive. If you have more or less, something bad must have happened. And technically, you can't be a human. So anyways, these, chromatids, they are held together by this small spherical thing called the centromere, which will dissolve later. After prophase, the cell enters metaphase. In metaphase, these T-shaped structures called centrals begin to move to opposite sides of the cell, and these chromatids, line up in the center of the cell. And then in anaphase, these chromatids begin to split, the centromere dissolves, and these T-shaped structures called centrals begin to move and push on the outside of the cell. The cell begins to become stretched and begins to form a new cell. They start pushing until a new cell is formed. When there is just a little connection left between the two cells, telophase begins. In telophase, this connection is cut off, and the cell uses all the proteins that's stored up to rebuild the cell membrane here, or cell wall, depending on if you're animal or plant, and it rebuilds the cell, and the nuclear envelope reappears, and these centrals begin to relax. See, the nuclear envelope comes back. After that, it just enters the G1 phase of interphase, and the cycle starts all over. And because of this process, you are no longer a single-celled organism, but a multi-celled organism. And your body is able to function more efficiently by moving food quickly through the cell to help it do the functions that it needs. Hope this helped. Be sure to share this with your friends, your teacher, email, dig, subscribe, like, +1, whatever. If you're a teacher, share this with your class, whatever. Just hope this helps, and have a great day.